Hello, my name is Drew. This is my wife Ryan, and on October 11th, 2014, our son John Patrick Hayden was born. Now, we didn't actually get to hold him, get to meet him, but he still had an impact on our lives. He still formed, his mere existence formed memories for us, and we feel the need to share them because we may not have held him, but he still was real to us.
And his life mattered to his family. We found out that we were expecting twins on April 1st, 2014. Our initial beta was 4,241, and I knew that meant twins, and I was terrified from the first day. I knew twins were higher risk for our babies and for our surrogate, and I was worried for both of them.
All three of them?
Yeah. And so we had our first ultrasound, and we saw two beating hearts, and we cried. And we started calling them Theo and Callie, because we had been talking for so long about surrogacy that we had called our future baby the theoretical baby, and now we had two. And I think during the first part of the pregnancy, we sort of lived from ultrasound to ultrasound. And I didn't want to plan too much. In the beginning, I was worried that we would lose one or both of them. But as the weeks went by,
I think it was about the halfway point where we really started to buy like two of everything.
Right, yeah. And we were starting to see ourselves as the parents of twins. And, we went out and we had to find a minivan that could put 3 car seats across it, and still have room for our whole family.
I mean, to buy the 2 car seats.
I will never forget Drew and I at the Babies R Us store in Bellevue with this cart, and it was like, not a whole lot, but these 2 car seats and some of the things we needed, and I have this picture of Drew like peering around the edge of all these boxes to try to get everything up to the cashiers. We started thinking about names. And because we didn't know if we were having a boy and a girl, or 2 girls or 2 boys, we came up with 4 names. John was named for my uncle, who is fighting cancer and surviving, and is one of the strongest men I know. Patrick, for my dad, who has been an incredible support to Drew and I. And Hayden for my dear friend Bernadette's little boy, who was also born from surrogacy in India. And we knew we were going to call him Johnny, because I wanted my uncle. My uncle is one of 12 kids, and he's one of the babies. And all of my aunts have always called him Johnny, even though he's 63 years old. And I wanted my Uncle John to get to be John. And so we were going to make everybody call our baby Johnny. And when we started thinking about girls' names, Mayo's named after my mother. Zial is a character that Drew and I loved absolutely. And Marie was after my best friend Maria, and my friend Bernadette's middle name was Marie. And I wanted my daughter to be named after two of the most intelligent women that I knew. And I wanted to call them Johnny and Maisie. And we kind of started to talk about them like that. We got some ultrasound pictures from the clinic at one point where you could really see their little faces. And John looked so much like Drew. I just cried when I saw the picture. And I was so excited for them. And we practiced all the time with our son Quinn. How many babies are you going to have? And he would say, 2. And we began organizing our lives around these 2 babies that were so wanted and so loved. And as the pregnancy progressed, I began to be concerned. In retrospect, I wish I would have not allowed my worries to be dismissed. And I don't know if that would have changed anything. I don't know if it would have made them tell me the truth or changed the care our surrogate got.
Or make them take different action instead of they did do.
But by the time the babies were born, I had been worried about them for a couple of weeks, and I'd expressed it to Kim more than once. And she kept telling me that I was having the perfect twin pregnancy whenever I brought up any worries. And we weren't having the perfect twin pregnancy. So on Friday, it was October 10th here in the U.S., and Drew had been working on the other side of the state, and I called him that morning and I just said, you just need to come home. I need you to come home. And he got in the car and was headed back. And I got this call, and it was Kim. And she told me that our surrogate was in labor and that we were having babies that night. And about I called Drew in hysterics. I told him he needed to get home as quick as possible and as safe as possible, but that our babies were being born. And I was shaking. And my older kids, Alex and Claire, were sitting with me. And I don't remember if they were happy or sad. I think they were scared, because I was.
Yeah, we didn't have our travel visas yet,
and
so we couldn't go to India to be with them.
We'd been working for weeks to get
months.
them. Yeah, months. So then Kim called me back, and she told me we had a girl, and I just could not stop crying. I was so happy. I was so thrilled. And I called Drew and I said, Daddy, Maisie is here. and I was so excited. But the first thing that I said to Kim is, okay, what about baby B? We talked for a few minutes, and she hadn't gotten a call from Dr. Bakshi. And so she hung up. And I was sick to my stomach with every minute that went by. And I knew that when one twin is born, it changes the inside structure of the uterus, and it's very easy for things to go wrong at that point. I was already upset that my daughter had been born vaginally, because Kim had assured us that they would always be doing what was absolutely the safest for the babies, and that's what we've been told would be the safest. And
well, we did have a C-section scheduled,
right.
But
they said Maisie was coming too fast, which we don't know how long our surrogate had been in labor.
There are also conditions that they did not treat that led to the premature labor.
And we'll talk more about that in another video. But as we sat there, I felt like this pit was growing in my stomach. And Maisiel was born at 8:55 in the morning in Delhi. And John was not born for another 75 minutes. And we didn't know. The hospital has and Dr. Bakshi have refused to actually give us records relating to the labor. So we have never been told why there was a 75-minute delay in the C-section. We have never been shown any evidence that they were monitoring our son. And when Kim finally called us back and told us we had a boy, she said he had a little bit of a rough start, but they resuscitated him and he was doing good, and Dr. Hola would give us a call.
Dr. Hola is the neonatologist at Adiva Hospital.
And I said, I remember saying, but he's okay. He's okay, right? And Kim said, yes, Dr. Bakshi says he's okay. And I cried that whole night because I knew he wasn't. I knew
75 minutes was just entirely too long for it to have been safe for him.
So we waited till 4 o'clock in the next morning for our call with Dr. Hola. And the first thing he said, I laughed because it's something that I had heard Bernadette's doctors say to her. The first thing he said was, "The girl child, she is doing fine." And I was so relieved, and then he said, "Your little boy is very, very sick." And he was without oxygen for I don't remember. He said at least 10 minutes.
Yeah, the story changed, but he was without oxygen for a significant amount of time.
And he told us that he had been intubated, and that he was very, very sick, and he didn't know what was going to happen, and we needed to get to India as quickly as possible. We were begging for pictures and information, and
we got up every day at 4 in the morning so that we could get an update from him for the entire time,
and
until we got our visas.
And I think what was the very next day, I remember saying, "Kim, I'm really confused here because Dr. Hola is telling us our son was deprived of oxygen and that he is very, very sick, and he is concerned that that John may not make it, and he is not confident about a good outcome." And Kim was saying, "Dr. Bakshi said there was no oxygen deprivation." And I said, "Are you sure? because this is what the neonatologist is telling us. And she said, no, no, no. Dr. Bakshi was the one there, and she knows. She's the one who knows. And what I remember most about those days is thinking, I don't care if my son has brain damage. I don't care if he's going to have a normal life. I just wanted him to have a life.
You just wanted him home with us.
Yeah. And John had a pretty good day at one point, and Dr. Bakshi, or Dr. Hola said, we can go ahead, and I'll email you if anything happens, but I'll update you. Like it was going to be 24 hours later.
Right. Basically, he was saying that Johnny was getting better as each, gradually improving, and he said, you don't have to get up at 4 a.m. every day. I'll email the updates, and if there is a problem, we'll let you know that way, and then we can start to call again.
So 12 hours went by, and I wanted those updates because it was the only connection I had to my child. But I was thinking, maybe Kim was right, and Dr. Bakshi was right, and there really wasn't that much of an oxygen deprivation, and he's okay.
And even outside of that, from our past experiences with emergency rooms, if you're the one that they'd say, I'm sorry, you have to wait, that means your kid is not the one who's in the most trouble. So we drew on that and considered that a good sign that there were other children who needed his more immediate and direct attention.
But 12 hours later, we got an email from Dr. Hola that said he needed us to call him, and we did. And he told us that John was not having encouraging neurological responses, and that he had to be intubated again, and that he was they'd put him on phenobarbital because they were concerned about seizures, and that they thought he was getting an infection, and that they were running tests to find out what the bacteria was, and in the meantime they were giving him antibiotics. And I was panicked at that point. I wanted to get to India, and I remember Kim yelling at me at one point, he just had a setback, right? You're going to get there and it's fine. And he just had a little setback. And then it was clear that it wasn't a little setback, that he was very, very sick. And at that point, Kim did offer to go to India for us. And I, in retrospect, I don't, I asked her, what is it that you're going to do for us in India? Because what we needed was help getting our visas so that we could go to India. And we'll talk more about that at another time. But honestly, I just, I don't know what she thought she was going to do. I mean, she's told us she's not a medical professional. I didn't need somebody else to take care of my babies. I wanted to take care of them. And
the solution to our problem was not to have somebody else get to hold him before we could.
Not only that, we had a budget, and Kim said that she would go to India, but we would need to pay her airfare and her hotel. And I could not justify spending, $2,500 for a last minute ticket to India, plus, a couple of weeks in the Hilton for Kim. I just, there wasn't a clear enough indication of what she was going to do that would markedly help our children. So we said no.
We said no, we couldn't.
Right, we couldn't do that. So we finally got our visas, and they arrived a couple days later after the approval, and we began to drive to Seattle so I could get on a plane. And on the way to Seattle, we got a call from Kim, and she said Dr. Hola and Dr. Bakshi say that Johnny is dying. And I couldn't process it at first because I'm going, but you know, you were the one telling me he just had a little setback. He's going to be okay. And she said, no, he's dying. And I said, what do you mean, when? And we pulled over the car, and it was night, and it was raining in October, and
yes, I don't even remember when or why we changed. Normally I drive, but all of a sudden I was the one taking the call and you were the one driving. I don't even remember like when or why that happened.
I think
in retrospect,
we were on the phone, and I said, well, what is happening? And I didn't know what else to say, so I was like, well, I guess you need to call me when he dies. And so we got the call, and I don't remember how we got to Seattle, but we did safely, thankfully. And I was begging Kim because I never got to hold him, and I said, you know, could I get a lock of his hair, because I saw this beautiful little black hair out from underneath his cap, or maybe a footprint or something. And she said no. And then we were trying to figure out what to do with, I didn't want my son to stay in India. I wanted him to come home with his family. And so Drew,
I emailed
American Citizens
the U.S. consulate in New Delhi. Tried to explain our last couple of weeks in as
horrific
as much brevity as possible. And we actually got a call from somebody at the consulate. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. This is terrible news.
What can we do to help?
What can we do to help?
And
we said, we want to be able to
bring our baby home.
Bring our son's remains home.
And at that point, Kim, I said, well, what is, I mean, we want to get him cremated. And Kim said, no, Dr. Bakshi says they don't cremate babies in India, that they go to a children's cemetery, which I didn't understand what that was. And I didn't really want it, but I Googled it. And that's when I discovered that a children's cemetery in India it's not like a section of a cemetery devoted to children, like it would be in the U.S. A children's cemetery is like a garbage pit, and they throw the kids in there, and they cover them up. And sometimes this is done on riverbanks where it erodes away and they float in the river. And I was looking at pictures and I was horrified. And I was throwing up. Like,
I think it was 2 days until you were able to get any amount of sleep again.
Yeah, I couldn't sleep.
And we managed to get a list of undertakers in country from the consulate, and we sent them to Cam. We sent it to Boxing and said, "Okay, contact one of these people."
They're waiting for a call.
Yeah. They the U.S. consulate
recommends
them. If you tell them what they need, they'll do it. What do you want them to do? They'll do it. And we instead got this story about Kim convinced Dr. Bakshi to take Johnny to her family's undertaker, and then proceeded to say, by the way, you owe them 4,000 rupees or something like that.
I don't remember exactly.
I don't remember the specific number, but
it was 8 times the going rate for cremation in India, based on what the consulate had told us.
If we had used one of the undertakers the consulate recommended, it would have been significantly
and
cheaper.
And at that point, it wasn't the money as much as it was just we asked
what we asked you to do, what we needed you to do. Why did you not do it? Why did you instead invent the story of how you went out and convinced her to do this thing that
was somehow special?
That we didn't need. That wasn't what you were supposed to do. That wasn't what was not what would have helped.
And when I was desperately trying to believe.
What? I'm getting off topic again.
That's okay. Yeah. So one of our last. So I guess I expected, because I wanted to believe that that the person that they had chosen was somehow more compassionate, more understanding than what the consulate had recommended. That's what I was hoping. Which is why when I got my son's ashes in a dirty cloth, shoved in a paper bag from a bakery, and they were held. The bag was held out in front of me, and I reached for it, and he said, "No, you have to pay for it first." And so I pulled out my purse and I paid. And that was the first time I touched my son. I think some people have said, "You got a baby, why aren't you happy?" And we are happy. We love our daughter so much. But our son was not disposable. He was a person. He was a member of our family and our extended family. He was loved, and
it wouldn't be fair to put all of that on May. It wouldn't be fair to her. There's no way that she'd be able to compete with a dead brother that now she has to make her parents feel better about.
It's not her job.
That's no way to raise a person, let alone.
Which is why we don't want John to just disappear, and we don't want to just pretend this didn't happen and put this on May. We want to acknowledge that our son was important. He was loved, and he died for reasons which seem very preventable. And we've been accused of being angry and spiteful and nasty, and
all we want is revenge. And don't get us wrong. We're
angry.
We're angry. We're pissed off about this. Our son did not deserve to be treated the way that he was. He was, for someone who had an experience immediately after birth that he did, for the doctor to then less than a week later say, or maybe it was a week later, but like basically say,
he's fighting.
You don't need daily updates from me anymore. He's getting better. He was strong. He was tough. He was resilient. He was determined.
And we loved him. And we wanted him.
It was just like his Uncle John, who, summoned up enough grit and just, expelled the cancer from his body pretty much. He said, you know what? I don't got time for this. I need to say, cancer, get the hell out. So that's exactly what it did. And so he's like, we could not have picked a better name for this boy.
And if your child died alone, 7,200 miles away from you, and then they treated him like garbage, I defy you to not be angry. I simply, it is beyond comprehension that anyone could expect us to have gone through what we went through with this child that we loved so much. And what we have left of him is this. A box we bought to put his ashes in. And that's it. And he deserved better than that. So yeah, we're angry.
We're angry, and we want people responsible to be held accountable for their inaction and their actions.
And at the very least, we may not be able to hold anybody accountable. I don't know if we're going to be able to stand up to the threats that we're receiving. But our son deserves for his parents to speak for him, because he can't.
And there are others
like
us who have had less than stellar experiences, who were promised the moon and the stars and didn't get anything, and were essentially abandoned with no help in a foreign country.
And we're talking for them too.
Yeah. And there's when we spoke to several clinics and surrogacy facilitators over several years before we had our son and our daughter, and everyone, and we, as well as other intended parents that we've met along the way, said, they promised us this, and this is what's going to happen, and everything was great. Everything seemed fine because we, just like them, we thought we did our research, but once the money was transferred,
then the balance of power shifts.
Everything changed, and when we needed Kim, when other parents needed their facilitators, they were nowhere to be found. And when we have spoken out to them and publicly, when others have tried to speak out, what they get is attacked. What they get is abuse. And that is probably the single worst thing to pile onto a pair of grieving parents.
And
who never got to hold their son.
And our son was tough. And so we owe it to him to be strong enough to speak for him and to tell the truth and to withstand this as long as we can.
If we can't, like I say, if we can't hold anybody accountable, even if we can't prevent this from happening to another family, what we want to get out there is you're gonna get these people are businessmen, and they're trying to get you to invest in them. They want your money, so they're going to tell you everything's gonna be fine. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that, and you don't have to worry about anything. They're gonna tell you what you want to hear. And if everything does go fine, if there's no complications, if the delivery goes smoothly, then
that's wonderful.
Then that's wonderful,
and we're happy
and we're
for
glad.
you.
Yes, and if something was to go wrong, we want people to know that this is what could happen. Not just this, but all of the
vitriol
and all of the terrible things that have been said to us through our blog, all of the lies that were told to us through messages and emails by Kim and Dr. Bakshi. Yeah. When everything works, they're great friends. They're probably really funny and really supportive.
But when you're in trouble, that's when you need somebody, and that's when you're going to find yourself alone. And
not only alone, but on the defensive.
And we had, since this has happened, people have reached out to us. They've explained, the multiple losses, miscarriage after miscarriage after miscarriage, and never taking a baby home. They've told us about their children dying, and what all these stories have in common is that when you have a tragedy, all of the professionals in the community rally together, and they need to shut you up. And they will do whatever it takes to do that. If that's sharing things from your medical records that would be uncomfortable for you, if that's making stuff up, falsifying records, calling you names, writing things that are incredibly unkind,
could be hurtful. Call it for what it is.
And all of this abuse comes, and if that doesn't work, then they pull out the legal threats. We're going to sue you for defamation. We're going to sue you for libel. We're going to sue you for whatever. And you're so tired. I mean, I don't sleep anymore. And
all that we've wanted to do, all that anyone would want to do after bringing their child's remains home is to mourn and grieve. That's all that we or anyone else in a situation would want to do. And having to face the possibility of somehow scraping together another enormous amount of cash to give to a lawyer who will then, and then we get our lawyers, they get theirs, we talk about everything all over again, keeping all of our wounds fresh and open, having everything that we've said or done picked apart semantically, legally, logistically. Everything's under a microscope. Everything that we say is subjected to scrutiny, without having to deal with a dead infant. That's draining enough.
But if that's what we have to do, so they don't sweep John under the carpet, pretend that he didn't exist,
pretend to all their other clients that everything is fine,
then that's what we have to do. And I guess the only thing that I can say about that is lawsuits mean public record. It means discovery. It means us having the ability to petition their client lists, their records, their financials, all of it. And not only that, that reporters look at public records specifically for cases that are interesting. And the thing is I guess I don't quite understand the logic of they want us to shut up. So the way they're going to shut us up is by creating a public record and having us go to be sued, and then we're going to talk about that
in a court
with reporters who are going to look at pictures of my dead baby that I never got to hold, with blood caked on his nose.
But outside of all that, we shouldn't even be dealing with this. How can the reaction to a pair of grieving parents who are saying to you, hey, you didn't do your job, and now look what happened, what do you have to say for yourself? What kind of professional turns around and says, you know what, screw you, I'm going to sue you and take you to court? What kind of professional reaction is that? What kind of human reaction is that? So this is what we want people to see.
Is to know
that this is what can happen if things go wrong and the person who you put your trust in to handle things for you either doesn't know what to do or chooses not to do anything. Now, if you still want to, if this is still what you feel is the best option for your family, we are, of course,
we understand.
We've
been where you're part.
Right.
We've been where you were.
If this is where you're at, your options, to say the least, are limited.
But just know
that this is what can happen.
And know, if it happened to us, it can happen to anybody. And if you...
We don't want anyone to go through what we're going through.
Right. And lastly, I've done a lot of thinking about what I would have liked, what they could have done differently for us after John died. And it's really simple, because we know no one can bring our baby back. Okay. What would have helped, first of all, handle our son's remains in accordance with our wishes and the American consulate's recommendations. Number one. Number two, tell the truth. Give all of the records, which were legally ours, and a complete set to the parents as quickly as possible. We spent weeks and weeks and weeks fighting to get records. That was stressful, it was inappropriate, and it never should have happened.
We still don't have them.
And we still don't have them. Which does not give us a great deal of confidence in what those records contain, frankly. Lastly, if you are telling that the surrogacy community is a small place, if you are telling other clients that you've decided that all of your clients are now going to deliver at a different hospital, while you're trying to tell us that the hospital where our son died was a phenomenal place, we're going to find out. And we did. What would have helped was for someone to come to us and say, we are so very sorry. I did not know, and I should have known, but I didn't. And what I want to do differently to protect other families is this. And explained,
right.
and advocated for us.
And before getting to that point, saying, what can I possibly do to help you through this terrible situation?
Instead of making it about you and how sad you are. And
how important it all of a sudden became for her to spend time with her family who was alive and well.
And our son is not ever going to be forgotten. But it's not just about him. It's about the fact we owe our daughter the truth. From the very beginning of our decision to use egg donation and surrogacy, we always intended to be very, very honest and open with our children and tell them about our commitment to India, professionally and spiritually, and we wanted our daughter to understand that we cared about her surrogate as a person, and
India would be
a part of her life forever,
and part of ours, because it's what made her being part of this family possible.
And that's not going to change. India will always be part of our life. But we owe our daughter the truth. And
where do we start?
Yeah. Where would you start?